CD7.
"21. Sheena selected a face cloth from the absurd array of lush white towels in the hotel bathroom. How many towels did people need? How many showers were the rich wankers who stayed in these places having per day? She wet the cloth and used it to wipe and cool Zoe's face. Talking about that night at the Durrell house, the girl had whipped herself up into a weeping, trembling state, and she needed to settle down. Sheena left Zoe to rest and returned to the lounge room, thinking she'd kill time flipping through the fashion mags fanned out on the coffee table. She wanted to fix her eyes on the glossy pictures and fill her head with that rubbish rather than dwell on the repugnant scene the girl had described, rather than imagine Kieran being out there somewhere with a monster like Mick. Earlier that afternoon, while the nurse was tending to the girls' dressings, Sheena had taken the opportunity to use the red payphone in the waiting room and ring the office number Joe had given her. She heard the hitch in his breathing when she told him Zoe was found. "How is she? Is she all right?" "Not pregnant, not addicted to heroin, alive," Sheena had replied, and then given him a quick report on Zoe's physical state. Even over the phone line, she could hear Joe immediately quarantine his feelings and gather himself to take on the Mr. Responsible role. "Okay, I'll ring Celia, sort out a few things, and then come to you. Where are you now?" "Darlinghurst. Listen, the kid's temperature is still high and she's pretty shredded. She needs to have a lie down." Yes, of course. If I book a hotel near where you are, can you take her there in a cab?" "Sure." The hotel was tucked next to Rushcutters Bay, a protected curve of the harbour filled with chinking sounds from the rigging of rich blokes' yachts. Approaching the sleek reception desk, Sheena and Zoe must have looked a ropey pair. A teenage girl so feverish she appeared drunk, with a bandaged hand, dressed in a grubby sarong and a cheap jacket, accompanied by an older female who was clearly not a creature who belonged in this luxurious habitat. Sheena had tensed up, ready to be hassled by the reception staff. But it turned out Joe had phoned ahead and paid with his bank card, so check-in was a smooth process, lubricated with smiling, as all transactions must be for the folks who stayed in such hotels, without even thinking about it. The unctuous young man behind the desk handed Sheena the room key and offered to have someone help with their luggage. "No luggage," Sheena responded, with a defiant look. She didn't want these people to think she was impressed or intimidated or pretending to be someone she wasn't. It was the plushest room Sheena had ever been inside. Well, not even a room. It was a fucking suite. Done up in chocolatey and creamy decor, with a few discreet golden touches. While Zoe slept in the gigantic bedroom, Sheena could ponce around in the whole other room. A lounge with sofas, teak coffee tables, and slim side tables that didn't seem to have any purpose other than supporting the bronzed lamps sitting on them. Along one wall was a long timber unit with a desk, a minibar, a TV set, and whatever else a travelling important guy might need. Broad windows looked out over the city, but so high up and insulated that there was no sound from the traffic below. It was like being wrapped in foam casing. Joe was kidding himself if he thought he could miraculously make everything right by booking a suite in this fancy pants hotel. As if that could undo all the shit that had happened. But then, Sheena checked herself for being a cynical bitch. Joe had probably just booked the one hotel he knew was nearby, and oddly, this did feel like the right place to be now. A quiet, orderly waiting room between the world Zoe had been inhabiting and what would presumably be her return journey home. Sheena had been babysitting Zoe in the suite for a couple of hours when there was a gentle knock and then Joe's voice through the door. "It's just me." As soon as Sheena opened the door, he kissed her on the cheek. "Thank you, Sheena. Thanks for taking care of her." She shrugged. "I just found her. and indicated the door to the bedroom. Zoe was awake, and when she saw Joe, she sat up in the bed, anxious about what to expect from him. He smiled broadly, but at the same instant, Sheena heard him breathe in sharply to see the girl so ill. Joe embraced Zoe, but carefully, handling a fragile thing. She let her weight fall against him, her forehead flopped against his chest, as if she could sink into the safety of this man. He rested his cheek against the top of Zoe's head and struggled not to cry. It struck Sheena that there was something compelling, something that could undo her, about watching a guy trying not to cry. Eventually, Joe said, "I left a message for your mother on her answering machine. I imagine she'll phone as soon as she gets the message. She'll be desperate to talk to you." Zoe answered in a frayed whisper, "I don't think I can talk to her." Joe took a step back, puffed out a breath, and looked at Zoe. "I tried to ring her," she said. "Couldn't ever do it." Sheena was surprised to hear the hard edge from Joe. "It was cruel, Zoe." Zoe opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "It was cruel," he said again. "I'm sorry. It's going to be difficult for me to forgive you. If you weren't so sick right now, I'd shake you hard. I'd shake the teeth right out of your stupid head." The girl crumpled into tears and he softened immediately, holding her tightly again as she wept. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm so happy to see you. It's okay." He had a way of saying, "It's okay," that made every fucking thing on earth feel okay. At least inside this soundproofed executive hotel suite. Joe and Sheena went back into the lounge room, leaving Zoe to sleep. He was restless, possibly unsettled to be here with Sheena, but most likely he was just anxious for Celia to call. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "I could order some room service, food or something." Sheena shook her head. She should go now. There was no need for her to hang around. Now Joe was here to take care of things. "Look, one thing I was thinking," she said. "Zoe needs some clean clothes to put on. It might freak Celia out a bit less when she sees her." "Oh, yes, that's a good idea. I wouldn't know what. I could go and buy her some stuff." "Thank you. Would you?" "Thanks." Sheena had to walk a long way from the hotel towards the centre of town to find a street with clothing shops. Even though she was physically tired, the lengthy walk turned out to be a relief, an opportunity just to be a person walking along the footpath, a respite from the business of thinking about Kieran and the girl and any of that. It was a chance to breathe, like stepping out of the hospital room of a dying person for a brief stroll. Once she found the right kind of shop, Sheena made a pretty good guess at the sizes, but it was still weird buying clothes for another person. With a wad of Joe's $20 notes, Sheena bought Zoe a bra and undies, a nightie, jeans, and a cotton top with loose sleeves that would be easy to put on over the bandages. She found a warm sweater in the shade of blue she'd noticed Zoe liked to wear, which had a loose polo neck to cover the bruising without being tight enough to hurt. Anyone who saw Sheena walking along with shopping bags hanging off her arms would assume she'd been on a jolly shopping expedition. The regular people she passed on the footpath had no notion of the drama going on in the hotel room one suburb away. They were just going about their normal lives. Sheena's normal life, such as it was, would resume soon, and she would have to squeeze herself back into some kind of realistic accommodation of the shitty way the world worked. She would like to know if Kieran was okay. She would like to know, but whatever. The cops would find him eventually, maybe dead, and the news would filter through to their mother and finally to Sheena. Sheena suddenly realised people in the street were staring at her. Something about the expression on her face must have looked stricken or anguished, and folks didn't want to be dealing with that when they were strolling past clothing boutiques. She scowled back at one bloke for no particular reason, just to get a fucking grip on herself, and then headed back to Rushcutters Bay. When Sheena let herself back into the hotel room, Joe was sitting at the desk, talking to his sons on the phone. He signalled hello to Sheena as she draped the clothes on the arm of the sofa and put the leftover cash on the coffee table. Joe mouthed, "Thank you." Sheena moved across to the window and stared down at the yachts in the bay, as if she'd suddenly developed a fanatical interest in boating. She didn't want Joe to think she was eavesdropping on his phone call, the last part of which was a terse exchange with his estranged wife. Sheena could hear the distinctive truncated sentences, his resolute attempts to be civil, his final sigh of capitulation. When Joe put down the receiver, he took a moment to shake off the chill of the call and then turned to smile at Sheena. "Thanks for getting the clothes. I really appreciate it. Zoe's sleeping again, which is good, I think." "Yep. Listen, she's got to keep on the antibiotics. She could easily get blood poisoning from the bites." "Right. Yes, thanks. I'll get out of your way now. Stay, please. Celia just rang from a service station on the highway on her way here." "Right. Did Zoe talk to her?" "No, she was asleep." But hey, I'm sure it's going to be sweet. Well, maybe not sweet, but not too shithouse in the end. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. No one needs me to hang around for the big family reunion, so I'll head off." "You really should stay, Sheena. Celia has Kieran in the car with her." "What?" "Apparently he showed up at the farm. I had no idea." Sheena felt her chest, her belly, her throat clenched tight. So the little fuckwit was alive. "What's the story?" Celia didn't say. She was keen to get back on the road. Sheena had a good crack at being acerbic, hard-boiled. "Maybe she's got my brother trussed up in the tray of her truck, hopefully sticking pins into the stupid bastard every few miles." A second later, she took a huge involuntary intake of breath, as if she'd been underwater a long time, and then the tears came. Joe grabbed the shiny tissue box holder off the desk and pushed it across the coffee table towards her. "Ta," said Sheena. It was the second time the guy had handed her tissues. But this time, she made sure to keep her distance, leaving the sofa between them as a barrier. Another weepy consolation fuck would not be a helpful complication to throw into the mix. Instead of having sex, the two of them sat on opposite plush brown sofas and gave the minibar a good walloping. They talked, both of them exhausted, about Zoe and Kieran and the last months, and it was gentle, like a brief lull in battle. "I've known Zoe since she was a baby," said Joe. "I loved her before I had kids of my own. There's a chance, even now, that I love that child more than my own kids. Is that terrible?" Sheena shrugged. "Your mother always said that was so. You're in agreement with Rosa, yet again." They laughed and selected 2 more tiny bottles from the minibar. The day was fading into evening by the time Celia knocked on the hotel room door. Sheena was shocked when she first laid eyes on her. So much thinner, skin dulled and papery, the light leached out of her eyes. She was breathless from rushing up from the car park, from rushing hundreds of miles to get here. She nodded a quick acknowledgement to Sheena, but then looked to Joe. "Don't panic when you see her," Joe said. "She's sick, but she's all right." Zoe, having heard the voices outside, was already out of bed, standing barefoot on the bedroom carpet, wearing the hotel bathrobe. Celia threw herself forward like a person running downhill and wrapped her arms around her daughter, chanting her love for the girl and how wonderful it was to find her safe. Celia's face was lit up. Sheena had never seen a human being's face transformed so utterly in a moment. Celia and Zoe clung to each other for a long time, both of them crying, sometimes laughing, shaking their heads in disbelief. Every now and then, Celia would lean back at a slight angle, so she could take a proper look at the girl, soaking up the sight of her. Then she would fold her daughter close again. 22. Celia had attempted to prepare herself to see Zoe, silently rehearsing during the drive to Sydney, assembling and reworking the lines to say, the things she must be careful not to say. But the electric charge of seeing her, the physical blast of it, pushed words out of the way. She thought her legs would give way under her. She wasn't sure her body was strong enough to handle that much feeling going through it without disintegrating. Then, as she held her daughter, Celia felt strength flood back, as if all the cells and blood and fibres in her body could now settle and restore her power. There was also, of course, anger in there, self-reproach, accusation, those bitter notes, but not for now. Those things might be churning away, but right now, all were overtaken completely by joy. Celia never wanted to break that embrace, but she could feel Zoe was exhausted and would need to lie down. There would be time later for the two of them to talk, to sit with Zoe's head in her lap and talk. And at this stage, there was something else Celia needed to do. "Kieran's here," she said, checking to see Zoe's response. "What?" Zoe was thrown, but she was smiling, bright-eyed. Kieran had suggested he wait in the corridor, anxious not to impose himself or cause any more damage. "Come in here," Celia called out. He rushed into the hotel suite and straight through to where Zoe was waiting for him. Celia could see he was awkward, desperate to sweep Zoe up, but trying not to be boisterous with the sick girl. The two of them kissed and wept, tumbling out apologies and explanations, how each had searched for the other across the city, how they must have just missed each other at every place they looked, talking over each other, neither making much sense. Celia stepped away, into the lounge room, to give Kieran and Zoe time alone. She exchanged a quick smile with Joe, who was over by the desk, speaking quietly on the phone. Sheena was perched on the back of one of the sofas, observing the weepy reunion going on in the other room. "Thank you, Sheena," Celia said, "for finding her, taking care of her." Sheena twisted her mouth and shrugged, uncomfortable, as if any kind of word was a slap in her face. But bugger that. Celia wanted this woman to receive the thanks and feel at least some of the warmth she offered. "I mean it, Sheena. Thank you so much." This time, Sheena looked directly at her and nodded. "You're welcome." "I'm sorry you didn't know your brother was okay," Celia said. "Even if I'd known how to contact you, Kieran didn't want me to tell anyone where he was." "Fair enough." By now, Zoe and Kieran were sitting side by side on the end of the bed. He was kissing her wrist, kissing the tender skin just above the bandage. "You'll be okay now," he was saying to Zoe. "You'll be looked after now." Sheena figured she'd stay out of the histrionics and let Kieran paw at his girlfriend for as long as he needed to paw. After the pair of them had blubbed and gushed at each other for a while, Zoe expressed a desire to have a soak in the voluminous hotel bathtub. Celia was only too happy to hurry back in there to run the bath for the girl and fuss over her. When Kieran came out of the bedroom to face his sister, his eyes were puffy from bawling, but he was beaming like a gormless fool. "Sheena, it's so great to see you." He bounded over, close enough that Sheena didn't have to stretch far to slap his face hard. Kieran was startled, but only for a second. Yeah, fair enough. I deserve that." "Have you been good? Have you been okay?" Sheena slapped him hard again. "Okay, Sheena. I reckon you've got a right to do that. You've got every right to be mad." She raised her hand to whack him again, but this time Kieran ducked away and grinned at her from a safe distance. Sheena couldn't deny that it was good to see him. Separate from the relief to know he was alive, She had really missed the annoying deadhead. "I'm sorry if you were worried about me," he said in an unexpectedly grown-up voice. "I wasn't worried." "Yeah? Good. Great." "I decided months ago not to give a flying fuck about you anymore," Sheena explained. "Yep, I can see why. Excellent decision. Good one. I should have let you get yourself arrested last year." Kieran nodded firmly. "You probably should have. I should have left you to clean up your own filthy messes." "Maybe that's right. I should have walked away 3 years ago when you were frying your brain with chemicals." "Maybe. I should have left you to kill yourself." "I'm glad you didn't," he said. Sheena shrugged and looked out the window, not wanting to sob like a wet fool in front of him. Kieran risked moving closer to her again. "How are you, Sheena? Be happy. I want you to be happy. I wish I could give you that." "Well, you can't." "No, that's beyond even the powers of a legend like me." He grinned and Sheena let him see her smile. "A smile," he said with mock triumph. "I can do that, which is not much. Not a tiny fucking scrap of what you deserve, Sheena." "Just shut up for a second, Kieran. Can you do that?" "I can do that," he said and leaned against the window ledge beside her for several minutes in silence, which was a record for Sheena's motor-mouthed little brother. "Mum?" Celia hurried back into the bathroom to help her daughter out of the bath. She held open one of the large white towels and cupped Zoe's elbow to steady her as she stepped over the bath edge. Still so weak, she could easily slip on the wet tiles. "My hand. I might need your help drying myself," said Zoe. Celia dropped her gaze, wanting to give her daughter some privacy, even while she was drying her off with the towel. It was hard to look at the bruising on her daughter's neck and not burst into furious tears. Sheena had told Celia what she knew about the break-in, the guard dogs, Zoe's failed search for Kieran. But whenever Zoe talked about any of it, she became so distressed that Celia decided it was better to leave it until she was stronger. Meanwhile, Joe had booked a twin room down the hall where Kieran and Sheena could stay the night. "Everyone's exhausted," Joe reasoned. "Let's all of us get some sleep, and in the morning we can think more clearly." Sheena argued a bit, but when Joe was gently insistent, she accepted the offer. "Okay, ta. It's a long way back to my place in Parramatta," she said. Joe went out and brought back generous piles of food from Una's on Victoria Street. Schnitzels, potatoes, coleslaw, and slabs of cherry strudel, along with 2 bottles of wine. It made Celia smile to think of this evening as one of those occasions. The last night of a holiday, or the day of a house move, some family event, when everyone mucks in together. She realised it was an occasion, a family reunion of a sort. Kieran took a plate of food into Zoe and sat on the edge of the bed, coaxing her to eat a few little bits. When dinner was finished, Celia was surprised at the amount of food they'd all consumed. Sheena excused herself. "I might go and have the longest shower in human history. Use 3 towels doing it. Then maybe veg out in front of the telly," she said. "Not many times in my life I'll get to stay in a high-class joint like this." With Sheena down the hall in another room and Kieran in the bedroom talking quietly with Zoe, Joe and Celia were left alone in the lounge room. She wondered if it would feel strained between them, too loaded, but all of that awkwardness seemed to have been blasted away. In fact, it was blessedly peaceful to sit here with this man who knew her so well. They sat in companionable silence for a while until anxious thoughts started to buzz in Celia's head. Should they go to the police? Was Zoe well enough for that? What should their next move be? Joe must have detected the shift in her mood. "Don't worry about police and any of that tonight," he said, answering her unspoken concerns. "I'll find out more, find out where we stand." "You're such a good friend to us, Joe. I don't even know how to measure the amount of gratitude I owe you, and Rosa." Joe shrugged and poured them both another glass of wine. Maybe I should have locked Zoe in her room for a few years, Celia said. There are parents who do that. Until social workers break into the house years later and find the children squinting against daylight. Joe was staring at her. I'm joking, she said. I realised that. Celia flopped her head from side to side against the sofa and laughed with exasperation at herself. Joe was watching her, smiling. Ah, Celia, I'm glad to see you so happy. It's torn me up to see you unhappy. She was surprised by his tone. It was intimate, as if he was asking something from her. The moment was broken when they heard Kieran calling Celia into the bedroom. She hurried in to find Zoe hunched up in a ball on the bed, wearing the nightie Sheena had bought her. Her breathing was shuddery after a bout of crying, and Kieran was stroking her back. She really needs to sleep, he said. She needs her mum right now, I reckon. Kieran kissed Zoe gently on the shoulder, then stepped away. He said goodnight to Joe before heading off to join his sister in the other hotel room. Celia kicked off her shoes, climbed onto the bed, and curled herself around Zoe's back. She smoothed the hair back from the girl's forehead and tucked it behind her ear, repeating this gesture in a steady rhythm until Zoe's breathing settled. Eventually, the two of them fell asleep. 23. It was too dim in the room for Sheena to see her watch. She was prepared to admit it was morning, sort of, but it was still very fucking early. Too early for Kieran to be stumbling around the carpeted floor putting on his jeans. She growled at him. Sorry, he whispered. Go back to sleep, Sheena. Too late for that. She was awake now, whether she wanted to be or not. She dragged herself to sit up against the upholstered bedhead. Don't go in there and wake up that girl this early. I'm not. Where are you going? Kieran ignored her and finished putting on his shoes. Sheena could see he was wired up, fixed on some notion. What's going on? She asked. She's so beautiful. None of that muck should have ever touched her. You know what I should do? Crawl back into bed, grab a few more hours sleep, then ask Joe for proper advice on how we can handle the legal mess. No, Kieran insisted. I have to fix it so Zoe isn't dragged down into any of this. I'm going to the cops and handing myself in. Well, hold on. Talk to Joe about the best way to do this. I'll take myself to a cop shop far away from here, in Penrith or Windsor or wherever. I can say it was just me and Mick went to that house. Sheena tried her stern voice with him. He mustn't rush and do something dumb. She pointed out that the police might not get hold of Mick, which meant Kieran would need Zoe as a witness. Otherwise, he could end up taking the blame for a shitload of heavy-duty charges. Malicious damage, those poor dogs, all of it. Kieran came back at her, unwavering. No. Don't you get it? I can't let Zoe be tangled up in it. The cops don't ever have to know she was there. This is the right thing to do. But you got to make sure it's the right thing for you, mate. I have to go, before anyone talks me out of it. Sheena sighed. If this is a mistake, don't expect me to bail you out or feel bad for you. I won't. Hang on. Shit. Should I come with you to the police station? No, I'll call you later. Sheena clambered across the bed in t-shirt and undies to reach the desk. She tore a piece off the hotel notepaper and scribbled numbers. This is the phone number of the house I'm living in. The other one is the place I'm working. But no, wait, give me a sec to get dressed. I should go with you, Sheena said and reached for her jeans. No, I'm going on my own. Thanks for offering though. Kieran slid the notepaper with the phone numbers into his pocket. I can ring and let you know where they've put me. He grinned, trying to look cheeky, maybe even bold. But she could tell he was pretty fucking scared too. See you, Sheena. The heavy drapes in the hotel room blocked most of the morning sun. but there was enough light leaking in around the borders. Celia sat on the edge of the bed and watched Zoe sleep. She was stronger, fever gone, colour in her face again, lost in sleep and with sheets covering the bruises on her neck. She looked serene, as if she were home in bed. Celia hadn't heard any noise to suggest Sheena or Kieran were up. They must still be asleep down the hall. She was glad. Let everyone keep sleeping as long as possible. Once awake, they would have to deal with the practical questions, the police, the accumulated toxins of the last months. She peeked out the bedroom door. At some point during the night, Joe had fallen asleep on the sofa in the other room. She winced to see how uncomfortable he looked, with his neck cricked forward and legs bunched up because the sofa wasn't long enough. She leaned in the doorway and watched him sleep, this lovely man. Even though Celia stayed completely still and silent for those few moments, Joe opened his eyes. He must have sensed she was there, or maybe he'd been awake the whole time. Celia felt self-conscious, caught out. Then he smiled, and she smiled back. Joe made a little show of trying to unfold his cramped limbs to sit upright. Celia mouthed, "Sorry." And he shrugged, grinned. "It's fine." There was a knock on the door, and he jumped up to let Sheena into the suite. Sheena only took a few steps inside, signalling she didn't intend to stay long. Joe didn't seem to notice the woman's strained manner and cheerfully asked her how she'd slept, offered to order breakfast for everyone, wondered if Kieran was awake too. "My brother left a couple of hours ago." "Where's he gone?" Celia asked. "He's gone to hand himself into the police." "He went on his own?" asked Joe. For a moment, all Celia could think about was that boy, on his own, in a police lockup. Then Zoe, still warm and rumpled from bed, appeared in the bedroom doorway. "Who told Kieran to go to the police on his own?" she demanded. "No one told him," Sheena replied. "He wants to protect you. He's going to say it was just him and Mick. He's decided it's the right thing to do." "It's a stupid thing to do. Why didn't you make him wait until— Shit! Zoe was agitated, breathless, as if someone had suddenly trapped her in this hotel room. "You know, it's not a stupid idea." Sheena addressed Celia now, trying to make this sound as matter-of-fact as any regular decision. "Kieran's in deep shit anyway. He was always likely to end up in jail. Doesn't mean your daughter has to get her life ruined too. Explain to her why this is a reasonable idea." Celia glanced round at Joe, but he was staring at the floor, his hands pressed together. He must be at least entertaining the notion of going along with this. Celia and Zoe could just drive back to the farm now, as if Zoe had never been anywhere near the Durrell house on that night. "Tell Sheena that's bullshit," said Zoe. "Mum, you don't think this is right, do you?" "What I think," Celia said slowly, "I think there is a lot for Kieran to deal with all on his own, and we should see if we can—" Sheena fired up then, her tone fierce. Look, my brother doesn't want to wreck Zoe's life, and that's a decent thing, isn't it? That's fucking honourable. It's what he wants to do. Let him do this." "No," Zoe insisted. "I was there. I have to say what happened." "You don't need to worry," Sheena argued. "The cops will round up Mick, maybe have already. The guy's not an intellectual giant, so they'll catch Mick and charge him with all the serious shit from that night." "You don't understand," said Zoe flatly. On that night, after Zoe had dumped the conked-out car, she had hurried back along the road on foot, then up the long driveway of the Durrell house to find Kieran. By then, she was out of breath, and her painful hand throbbed with every pulse. She made a wide arc around the bodies of the poor dogs, as if their deadness might touch her if she went too close. Even from outside, she could hear Mick smashing the place up, yabbering, shouting abuse at Kieran, and every now and then letting rip with a howl of frustration. Zoe didn't want to go anywhere near him. At that moment, all she wanted to do was persuade Kieran to leave. Afterwards, once they were well away from Mick, there would be time to apologise for running off, apologise for the things she'd said. The front door was wide open, so Zoe could walk straight into the marble-tiled foyer. To the right was a formal sitting room. Mick had already been through there. 2 huge peacock blue ceramic pots were smashed apart, paintings pulled off the walls, with the canvases torn open. Cupboard doors splintered. Where he'd gone hunting for the cash he'd been promised was in the house. It was the same in the dining room, the polished wood cabinets fractured and gouged by the sledgehammer. She moved further inside, down a central corridor, until she heard Mick in the study. He was ripping the place apart, yanking every drawer out of the massive rosewood desk carved with Chinese dragons. Zoe was wearing soft-soled shoes, and with Mick making so much noise, smashing things and cursing at Kieran, she figured he wouldn't hear her approach. She could find Kieran and signal to him to follow her out while Mick was occupied with the money search. But somehow, even with all the racket, Mick knew she was there. "Did you bring back the car, you skanky bitch?" Zoe backed away towards the front door. A second later, Mick was out in the corridor, his clothes ripped and bloody, his body jerking as if the only thing holding it together was twitching ligaments. "Where's Kieran?" Zoe asked. "Your boyfriend fucked off, ran up the road looking for you, the useless dickwad." There was a chance Mick would just let her go. He was there for the money, so Zoe turned her back on him to head towards the door. "Where's the car? What did you do with the fucking car?" She ran then, trying not to lose her footing on the polished floor. As she reached the doorway, Mick lunged after her, hooked his hand round her belly and slammed her down onto the marble. He flipped her over onto her back and pinned her there with his knees. He was muttering about the car, yanking at her clothes, shoving his hands into the pockets of her jeans to scrabble for the car keys. When Mick realised she didn't have the keys, he grunted, even angrier, and stared down at her. She could smell his breath rasping out of his wet mouth. His pupils were so dilated that his eyeballs were just dark, shiny stones in the eye sockets. Zoe didn't make a sound, but just the sight of her riled him up. He grabbed the side of her neck with one hand, digging his fingers into the flesh, then shoved the heel of his other hand down hard on her throat. She couldn't breathe with the weight of him on her neck. He pushed harder, and Zoe realised he wasn't going to release the pressure until she was dead. She couldn't see properly, vision clouded, pain searing down her gullet, lightheaded from lack of air. "I'm going to die. This is it." Mick had pinned her injured arm to the floor, but her other arm was free. She stretched out her hand as if she could miraculously grab hold of a rope to pull herself out of this moment and stay alive. Her fingertips hit something cold. It was a cast-iron doorstop in the shape of an owl, with a sharper protruding piece of metal that formed the stand. The thing was heavy, and Zoe wasn't sure where the strength came from for her to lift it. She swung the metal owl up until it slammed into the side of Mick's head. He lurched sideways and his hold on her weakened sufficiently that she could roll out from under him. She got up on her knees and smashed the doorstop down on his temple twice more. Holding the cast-iron owl against her belly, she dragged herself across the tiles, out of Mick's reach, and gulped air back into her lungs. He lay completely still, and there was a lot of blood. She watched his chest move with few meagre breaths, and then stop entirely. The lizard eyes were open but opaque, dulled. Once Zoe was certain he was dead and couldn't come after her, she got to her feet and ran out of the house. Her throat was scalded by every intake of breath, but she kept running until she reached a big enough road to hitch a lift. Sheena had always figured there was a high likelihood someone would bash Mick's skull in one day. She hadn't expected it to be a 16-year-old princess. The girl was shaking, holding her hands in front of her to make the others back off, not wanting Joe or her mother to touch her, not wanting them to come too close and be contaminated by the story she just told them. Does Kieran know what happened to Mick? Sheena asked her. He didn't know, but I told him last night. So when Kieran left this morning to hand himself in, he knew this. He knew the police had found a dead man in the house, as well as the slaughtered dogs. Sheena sank onto the sofa and considered the full weight of the load her little brother had decided to take on. She had to respect it. He was a crazy fucker, but she had to respect it. Zoe's voice was surprisingly steady. I didn't know Kieran would do this. Try to take the blame. I have to go to the police now and say what really happened. Sheena watched Celia, who stared at the floor, pale and silent, not even looking at Joe. Maybe the woman was contemplating allowing Kieran to take responsibility for this. It occurred to Sheena that the way things usually went, he could tell some plausible provocation story, and it wouldn't go too badly for him in court. Celia could be weighing that prospect, tempted to let her daughter slip away from this trouble. Mum, listen to me. I need to go to the police straight away and tell them. Sheena waited for Celia to argue against the plan, but instead she looked at Zoe and nodded. I'll come with you, Celia said, if you want me to. Yes, please. 24. Rosa was relieved the summer of 1977 to 78 had been blessedly mild all through December and most of January. Today was the first baking hot day and her limbs felt heavy, like wading through molasses. She was absurdly old to be still working as a fruit packer, and the job was becoming burdensome. The early starts, the walk up from her house to Celia's place, long days in the packing shed, although she would just laugh and wave her hands airily if anyone else mentioned it. For this harvest, the old picking team was in the orchard and moving through the pick at a good speed. Mind you, Rosa observed that Roy, the team boss, was being cautious with his crumbly spine, and she hoped the poor man would manage through the weeks of hard work ahead of them. Not so many peaches to pick this season, because the trees had been left to go almost into ruin during the winter. Even so, there would be enough fruit to pay off some debt and begin to pull the business back into its feet. No one could deny that Celia had worked tremendously hard since she came home, first making up for the neglect around the property and now throwing her effort into the harvest. Celia steered the tractor with full bins of fruit up to the shed, just as Joseph drove his air-conditioned car into the yard. The two of them smiled hello and did a little pantomime to each other about the heat. Joe kissed Rosa. Hi, Mum. I dropped another carload of boxes on your back porch. He was moving into his mother's place, just for the months it would take to restump and then renovate the house he had bought in town. Have you laid your eyes on the ugly hovel Joseph has purchased? Rosa asked Celia. Celia laughed. Yes. What can you say when you discover your child has no taste? Rosa asked. Sandra had brought Joseph up, looking at books about the great cities and their fine buildings, appreciating what was well-proportioned and elegant. I had always thought Joseph was a man of good taste. Celia shook her head with mock disbelief. And yet now he buys an ugly house. We are talking make you want to slit your throat ugly, Rosa added. She saw Celia exchange a smile with Joe. She knew the two of them talked about how to handle her. She knew this very well. Mum, I explained to you. It's a matter of finding a place I can afford that's near the boys where I'll have room when they stay over. None of my business. Rosa put her hands in the air, surrendering. Rosa then saw Celia's gaze shift to the orchard. Zoe was walking between the rows of trees, up to the yard. The girl filled her water bottle from the big container, then splashed water over her face and neck to cool off. She was filthy, sweaty clothes stuck to her, face greasy with sun cream, hair squashed under a cap, but no one with eyes in their head would say she was not a gorgeous creature. There had been many talks with police officers and lawyers. Explanations given, allowances made, charges answered in the court. Zoe received what is called a suspended sentence, but not for killing the fellow. In the end, no one thought that should be on her head. The judge warned Zoe that she must be of good behaviour. Rosa wasn't convinced many people in the world would last long if they were supposed always to have good behaviour. Because of Zoe's age, none of the criminal matters would stay on her record. Of course, there were matters that would stay in a person's mind for a long, long time, and no court rules could change that. Joe had organised legal help for Kieran. Rosa suspected he paid the young man's costs without telling Heather, who would most surely have disapproved. Kieran spent some months in prison, and when they released him 2 weeks ago, he travelled up north to find work on a prawn trawler, wanting to stay away from unhelpful influences and earn himself some money. Zoe and the young man wrote letters to each other while he was in jail and had pledged to keep in contact. Rosa wasn't sure if it counted as a romance anymore. Nobody would say it aloud. But Zoe's future and that young man's future were likely to be very different. But there was a love between the two of them, a loyalty, a bond, whatever somebody might want to call it, and there was surely a chance that would last in some fashion. And who could say what would happen to Kieran in the long run? Rosa sometimes pictured bad things for a boy like that, rolling his car on a dirt road, stumbling into the path of some angry man at the worst moment. But no one can see into the future. Rosa hoped that anyone hearing the boy's story might join her in wishing the best for him. Celia was still in contact with the sister, that Sheena. At first, the two women needed to speak about legal matters and such. But since then, Celia had made a point of ringing Sheena every few weeks for a chat. If you could call a conversation with that sharp creature a chat. Celia persevered, believing the young woman appreciated their connection deep down. It was not for Rosa to judge this or offer any comment. Apparently, Sheena was doing well. She had moved to Melbourne for a fresh start and had been quickly promoted to manager of a bar there. She had recently acquired a new boyfriend who, as far as Celia could assess from the phone calls, was not a bad fellow and was in no way a dickless wonder. Rosa looked out into the orchard to see that the sun had started its swing down from the midday point, and there was now a ribbon of shade alongside the fruit trees. Zoe was standing half in shade and half in sun, with the light flaring off her fair hair as she tipped her head back to drink from the water bottle. Celia's eyes were fixed on her daughter, soaking in the sight of her, hoping to make it last for the months they would be apart. "Zoe's all packed," Celia said to Joe. "Her suitcase is just inside the kitchen door." "Right. We'll need to head off in half an hour or so." Joe was giving Zoe a lift into town to catch the Sydney bus. During the remainder of the past year, after all the trouble, Zoe had attended a high school in the city, living with her aunt Freya. She had returned home for the summer holidays, but today she must leave again, and Celia would have to do without her for the school terms. "Zoe," Celia called out. "Time to go soon. Better hop in the shower, which means you can stop working now." Zoe stretched with exaggerated relief, miming that her back was aching from all this slave labour. She peeled off the sweaty cap, tipped the rest of the water over her head, and shook her wet hair from side to side. Celia laughed, adoring her. So, it seemed there was to be no vodka for Rosa this coming winter, since she would have her son living with her. This wouldn't be such a bad thing. Joseph could help around the place, and more importantly, he could keep Celia company when Zoe went back to the city for the next months. Of course, when Celia and Zoe were separated, they had regular phone calls. The girl was stronger, no doubt about that, but Celia said she only needed to hear 2 syllables over the phone line to detect the blackness in her daughter's voice, if Zoe was in one of her wretched moods. Other times, she would sense the distance and know Zoe wasn't telling her something. But Celia couldn't drive down to Sydney and demand answers, take over. She would have to let the phone call end and just sit with it. Some problems could be solved by throwing effort at them, but some necessary things, like letting your child go out into the world, the beautiful, perilous world, required you just to sit with things gnawing in your belly and learn not to do anything. Rosa knew that Celia still had some sleepless nights, hours in which she would imagine and catalogue all the possible dangers. But now, according to Celia, she made the effort to add extra moments to the conjured scenes, envisaging how Zoe might escape trouble by her good judgment, quick wits, strong heart. There was comfort in that, urging her daughter to be strong, as if all the hours of worrying and urging would distill and harden into a small amulet Zoe could wear around her neck, wherever she might be. Acknowledgements. Deborah Oswald would like to thank Michael Wynne, Kerry Lawrence, Annabelle Sheehan, Karen Oswald, Michelle Franks, Les Langlands, Anthony Blair, Shelley Eves, Dale Druin, and Noel Franks for their help. Thanks to Currency Press, who published The Peach Season in 2007, and to Rodney Seaborn, Christopher Hurrell, Stephen Collins, David Berthold, the cast and creative team of the Griffin Theatre production, Ben Ball, Rachel Scully, and the team at Penguin Random House. Huge thanks, even more than usual this time, are owed to Richard Glover.
Belinda and Penguin Random House hope you enjoyed the reading of
The Whole Bright Year. Written by Deborah Oswald, narrated by Maria Angelico.
Production copyright 2018 by Penguin Random House Australia. All rights reserved.